What's going on everyone, Lance here. So in every mainline series Pokemon game, we are tasked with battling through the Elite Four to face the champion, the strongest trainer of that region. And one of the most well-known champions is Sinnoh's very own Cynthia. Cynthia is known as being one of the hardest champions to beat in both Sinnoh games, and for good reason. If not prepared, and I have to emphasize prepared, because some people will be like, well, actually, Cynthia is very easy. I brought Pokemon like Mamoswine and Garchomp to counter her team, and also made sure that they were all 5 levels over her max Pokemon, so I could beat her without losing. Well, of course you won. You planned your team around beating her. But in a normal or blind playthrough, your team will not normally be as prepared. And this is because of how diverse it is. She has Pokemon on her team that have moves specifically for matchups, like Flamethrower on Garchomp to counter Ice types, or Water Pulse on Togekiss to counter Rock types. Her team is just built differently than most champions, and due to how strong and diverse her team was, it grew this culture fear around it because of Pokemon like her ace Garchomp, who was known to end matches if not checked. I mean, her battle is the first time you ever see a trainer in the entire region use a Garchomp or a Spiritomb. She is a force to be reckoned with, and she was seen as the strongest champion in all Pokemon history by fans for years. But as of Sword and Shield, we got Leon, the unbeatable champion. Pokemon's way of telling us this guy is strong. I mean, they did give him Pokemon's favorite Pokemon. But putting my Charizard hate aside, Leon is a strong champion, that is no joke. And yes, just like Cynthia, if prepared, he's a cakewalk. And the game does give you a level 70 legendary right before your match. But if you don't use Space Snake 2 Electric Boogaloo, you might have a reasonably hard time against Leon. Since Leon shares some crazy similarities to Cynthia's team and structure, I mean, they do both have type diverse teams, Pokemon that we might not have seen in the region before this match. I mean, my first time against Leon, I did not know what type Dragapult was, since I've never seen one before in the game. It's just like Spiritomb or Garchomp, since you might not have known what types they were. Also, they both lead with ghost types, which I thought was pretty neat. But with the existence of Leon and his unbeatable title, it begs the question, if these two champions were to have a full 6-on-6 battle, who would win? And that's what I'm here to figure out. So when starting research for this fight, I had to set some rules up because otherwise this would not be fun to make. So for this battle, we have to set some limits. First, they can only use Pokemon they have had in the mainline games. So no anime or TCG. That's not a real problem, but it has to be said because no Cynthia's Rayquaza from the TCG and also kind of the anime. And I'm also limiting all their Pokemon to only have abilities, items, and moves they have been shown to have in the games. This means I don't get to slap broken showdown sets on their Pokemon, and also make my life a living distortion world for team building. And finally, when making these sets, I can choose the beneficial natures, I'll cover the choices on them later, and I can only do EV spreads in the form of 252, 252, 4 setups, so it's not too crazy getting very specific on, oh yeah, it could take this attack if I give it this much HP, this much defense, because that would make the probable battle situations too crazy to run. So those are just the restrictions for the Pokemon. As for the battle, it will be a 6-on-6 all level 100 and Dynamax for both sides. Since if only Leon could max, it would be too uneven, and if anybody wants to argue that choice, in the anime they allowed Champion Lance to Dynamax as Gyarados, so this seems reasonable. And I'll finally be doing this walkthrough of a battle, what it would look like based on damage calcs and some showdown battles. I hope these parameters are fair enough for people since it does not give a real disadvantage to one side over the other. But the first thing to do for this match is to look at each other's Pokemon, starting in chronological order with Cynthia. So let's start off with Cynthia's Spiritomb, the Ghost Dark type. Looking at its abilities, Pressure is probably the more notable one thanks to the fact that Leon doesn't have any screens or subs on any of his Pokemon, so Infiltrator is really useless. So Pressure is probably going to be its main ability. As for items, it's got amazing items in both Leftovers and Rocky Helmet. Both great moves for such a disruptive Pokemon. And speaking of its moves, it's got Dark Pulse and Shadow Ball for stab, got some coverage in like Psychic and Silverwind, but the disruption moves on this Pokemon go off. It's got Will-O-Wisp, Hypnosis, Pain Split, Substitute, Swagger, Psy-Up, Protect. All amazing moves for a Pokemon like this. On top of it having relatively decent base stats and having really good defense and special defense, which combat for its relatively low HP. But in all, this Pokemon will be really good at disrupting and taking out ghost types. Next, we get to take a look at Cynthia's Gastrodon. Now, Gastrodon was only used once by Cynthia in her original Diamond and Pearl battle, so it's kind of underwhelming. It only has Sticky Hold, which it doesn't have an item to hold, and it's only got the moves Muddy Water, Earthquake, Stone Edge, and Sludge Bomb. Otherwise, its stats are pretty good for a defensive Pokemon, but it doesn't have the defensive arsenal like Spiritomb. If this Pokemon was to go against some of Leon's, it'd be pretty good against, I guess, his like Inteleon maybe and his Rhyperior, but otherwise this Pokemon's pretty outclassed by a lot of other Cynthia Pokemon, so this one, not the best. Next, we're looking at Cynthia's Grass type, Roserade. So Roserade's abilities, Natural Cure and Poison Points, are both pretty good abilities, but Poison Points being a little better due to the fact that Leon doesn't have too many statusing Pokemon, so Poison Points would be better on Roserade since it'll probably be taking a few physical hits. In the item department, it's only got White Herb, but that's a really good item for it since it does have access to Leaf Storm. But also looking at its moves, it's got quite a small roster, but really good. It's got Energy Ball, Sludge Bomb, Shadow Ball, Extra Sensory, Toxic, Leaf Storm, and Sleep Powder. So notable ones here are almost all of them. I feel like Toxic is less useful than Sleep Powder, but definitely Leaf Storm, Energy Ball, Sludge Bomb, Shadow Ball, all great moves, on top of it having an amazing 125 in special attack. This Pokemon will give Pokemon like Rhyperior a run for its money. Next, we got Cynthia's other Water-type Pokemon, Melodic, rocking the abilities Competitive or Marvel Scale, and the items Wide Lens and Leftovers. I'd say the Leftovers is probably the better of the two, considering it's known for being this bulky disruptor that just heals off damage. And this Melodic does have access to Rest, Recover, and Aqua Ring if it wants to just be this thorn in Leon's side. It's also got Surf and Ice Beam for water and ice damage, got Dragon Pulse for a bit of coverage, Dragon Tail for some more disruption. This Pokemon's got a pretty good disruptive moveset on top of being able to deal out consistent damage, even though it's probably best used in a defensive setting. It counters a fair amount of Leon's Pokemon too, like Rhyperior, potentially Cinderace, and more. Moving on to Togekiss, Cynthia's Fairy Flying type, as opposed to its normal Flying type it had in Pokemon Platinum. It has the abilities Hustle and Serene Grace, which, if you know what Serene Grace does, you know why Togekiss is a monster. And the items King's Rock, Leftovers, and Expert Belt, all relatively good moves for a disruptive Pokemon like this. It's also got the legendary Air Slash, pairing amazingly with Serene Grace, on top of having Aura Sphere, Water Pulse, Psychic, Shadow Ball, Grass Knot, Dazzling Gleam, Thunder Wave, really good moves overall. This Pokemon does a bit of disrupting while a bit of damage, gives a hard time to things like Dragapult, Rillaboom, and any Pokemon that's a little slower than it that it can flinch stall. Next, we're going to be covering Cynthia's Lucario, which, by looking at this Pokemon, you can tell it's a bit of a monster. It's got the abilities Steadfast and Inner Focus, which are okay moves. Leon doesn't really have too many Pokemon with Fake Out, so the abilities aren't the big play here, but when we look at its items, it's got Life Orb, Weakness Policy, and more importantly, access to Lucarionite, the Mega Stone. Lucario can run both a physical and special set due to having amazing spread between the two. It depends on if we run Mega or not Mega, whether it's better for attack or special attack. But looking at its moves, it's got Aura Sphere, got Close Combat, Blaze Kick, Rock Slide, Bullet Punch. It has Earthquake. I didn't even know a Lucario got Earthquake. Got Shadow Ball, like amazing move pool. And when looking at its Mega stats, this thing might be a sure candidate over Garchomp for a Mega Pokemon. Lucario gives a handful to a lot of Pokemon, especially with Adaptability Bullet Punch or Extreme Speed. This Pokemon can be a complete monster and definitely will be something Leon might need to look out for. Next, we're going to touch on some of Cynthia's more forgotten Pokemon, the ones that she used in Black and White. First being Braviary. Now Braviary does not have an item just like Gastrodon due to its one appearance in a non-battle facility-like area, but it does have access to Sheer Force with Brave Bird, Crush Claw, Shadow Claw, and Retaliate. I feel like this Pokemon would have been a top contender if it had a more diverse move pool and an item, but when looking at it, it's just an average Pokemon. Then we also get to take a look at Cynthia's Electros, having Levitate with the moves Crunch, Wild Charge, Dragon Claw, and Flamethrower, being probably her most underwhelming Pokemon due to how this Pokemon is bred and also itemless, while being kind of not useful really against any of Leon's Pokemon. Next, we get to take a look at Cynthia's final Black and White introduced Pokemon, Glaceon. Now, Glaceon did get to have an appearance in the Pokemon World Tournament, getting in an item, but its moves weren't that increased from her battle in Undella Town. It only has Snow Cloak, and it's not really fast enough to take full advantage of the Choice Scarf, to where it's slightly an underwhelming Pokemon. Maybe if it had a better move pool, I would consider it, but with just Ice Beam, Shadow Ball, Signal Beam, and Water Pulse, it's a little underwhelming, but definitely better than Electros and Braviary. And finally, the one everybody's probably been waiting for, Cynthia's Garchomp. Now, Garchomp is the powerhouse that it is perceived to be. It has access to the abilities Sand Veil and its hidden ability, Rough Skin, packing the items Citrus Berry, Focus Sash, Choice Scarf, or Garchomp Bite, the Mega Stone. It's got great moves in Dragon Rush, Earthquake, got some coverage in Brick Break, Stone Edge, got Outrage, can set up with Swords Dance and Sandstorm if it needs, and also can pack Dragon Claw if it wants some better accuracy without drawback. As for its stats, looking between the Mega and the Base, you can tell the difference is a trade-off for speed versus power. Now, if any of you know about competitive, you actually know that Base Garchomp is a little bit better than Mega Garchomp due to the speed drop. It loses a significant speed tier when going to Mega, which actually hindered it more than it helped. It did get that bulk from it, but it wasn't enough to make up for constantly getting outsped, making Scarf Chomp, which we do have access to, a lot better of an option. Obviously, this Pokemon counters a ton of Leon's Pokemon, especially if Scarfed, taking care of things like Cinderace if it needs with one Earthquake. It's got Dragapult knockdown with Outrage, Haxorus with Outrage. This Pokemon's going to be something that Leon's definitely not going to be able to handle too well. Well, that pretty much covers Cynthia's team, but now we get to move on to Champion Leon's team. So starting Leon's team, we got his Ghost-type lead, Aegislash. So Aegislash, as many of you know, has two forms, the defense form and the attack form, where depending on which form it's in, it will have the 140 in its attack or defense stat. So on the side, I basically just showed the defense form, but if you just swap the attack and defense, that's what its attack would be. It does have the ability Stance Change, obviously, and it has access to the items Citrus Berry, Weakness Policy, Assault Vest, and Life Orb. All great items. As for its moves, it's got King Shield, Shadow Ball, Sacred Sword. Has some notable ones, got Shadow Sneak, Iron Head, Air Slash for coverage, Steel Beam if it just wants to be this complete bomber and just do a ton of damage real quick. But yeah, overall, really good moveset, terrifying Pokemon. It is in the range where it was nerfed since Gen 6. It's got the Gen 7 stats where it's no longer got the devastating 150, but still an amazing and terrifying Pokemon that Cynthia will have to look out for. Next on Leon's roster, we got his first Dragon-type Pokemon, Haxorus. So Haxorus has access to the abilities Mold Breaker and Rivalry, as well as the items Scope Lens, Lumberry, Focus Sash, and Life Orb. It's packing the moves like Poison Jab, Iron Tail for coverage, Outrage for stab, it's got Earthquake as well, can set up with Dragon Dance, got Rock Slide in coverage, it's got some amazing moves, even First Impression in close combat. This Pokemon's definitely got a very diverse moveset, and also the stats to back it up. It is a little slower than one of Leon's other candidates, so it might make it a choice between the two that might be the deciding factor. But overall, a really good Dragon type. Next Pokemon up on Leon's team is going to be Mr. Rime. Mr. Rime has the abilities Tangled Feet or Screen Cleaner, both mediocre abilities, but also has access to the items Rocky Helmet, Train Extender, Life Orb, or Expert Belt. All relatively okay items, probably Terrain Extender is not going to get used if it's chosen, but with moves like Psychic, Thunderbolt, Fake Out, got Dazzling Gleam, Sucker Punch, Zen Headbutt, Grass Knot, Blizzard. It's got a very good arsenal on its hand, and definitely could give a few of Cynthia's Pokemon a run for their money. but with the lower speed stat, it's definitely not the most terrifying Pokemon. Another one of Leon's Pokemon is Seismitoad. Now Seismitoad actually has 3 abilities in Swift Swim, Water Absorb, or Poison Points, all very good abilities for Seismitoad. It's packing the items Scope Lens, Lumberry, Focus Sash, or Life Orb, which I'd say Life Orb is probably the most beneficial out of this, but the others definitely could be handy. It packs the moves like Toxic, Drain Punch, Liquidation, Earthquake on the physical side, or it also has some like Sludge Wave, Muddy Water, Focus, Blast, and Earth Power on the special side. Definitely a diverse Pokemon that could take advantage of Rain if it does so choose to, because it can set its own Rain up. But with mediocre stats, it might not be the best choice for a ground type for Leon, but definitely could still put a little thorn in Cynthia's side. Rocking its way into Leon's next slot is Rhyperior, with the abilities Solid Rock or Lightning Rod. Solid Rock probably being the more solid option, due to the fact that Cynthia really doesn't have too many electric type moves on her team, and also Solid Rock just being a phenomenal ability, cutting super effective moves in half. Also with items like Weakness Policy, Pashio Berry, Rindo Berry, and Assault Vest, it can totally mitigate a lot more damage as well, making this thing an overall great tank. And with moves like Earthquake, Stone Edge, Heat Crash, Dragon Rush, Rock Slide, High Horsepower, Ice Punch for some coverage, this Pokemon definitely is going to stay around to get at least a hit in here and there and make Cynthia worry about who she has to send out against it, especially with a devastating 140 in attack. Next, we get to cover Leon's second Dragon-type Pokemon, Dragapult. Now, Dragapult is an amazing Pokemon, rocking the abilities Clear Body and Infiltrator. Maybe Infiltrator being a little more useful due to Cynthia having a few substitute users, but in its items department, it's actually a little lacking, with Lechi Berry and Eject Button. I'd say Lechi Berry might come in a little more handy if we decide to build this like a physical attacker, but otherwise it really doesn't need an ability due to how great its stats are. Rocking a 142 in speed, meaning this thing's speed tier is probably one of the highest out of all Pokemon in this battle. It also has moves like Shadow Ball, Flamethrower, Thunderbolt for coverage, rocks Draco Meteor to just bomb the enemy, Dragon Darts for good physical damage, U-Turn for like pivot ability. This Pokemon is definitely one of Leon's top tier Pokemon, and will give Cynthia's Pokemon a run for their money, outspeeding even Garchomp. Now we get to take a look at the first of Leon's starters in Rillaboom. Now all the starters have access to their hidden abilities, which is great, considering Rillaboom does get Grassy Surge. But if you look at its moves, it does not have Grassy Glide, which does make grassy terrain a little more even on both sides of the field, healing the enemy while only boosting its moves like Wood Hammer or Drum Beating. So it might not be the most beneficial nature and might want to stick with Overgrow to not help the enemy out, but Rillaboom does pack some great items like Assault Vest, Leftovers, Life Orb, on top of having some great moves like Wood Hammer, Darkest Lariat. It can set up with Sword Stance. This thing also has U-Turn, Fake Out, Superpower. It's definitely built competitively, making this one of Leon's most terrifying Pokemon for Cynthia, taking out things like Melodic, handling things like Garchomp even. Next, looking at Cinderace, this might be Leon's best Pokemon, outclassing even his Charizard, thanks to its ability Libero. Now Libero is basically Protean, but for Cinderace, meaning whatever move it uses, it switches to that type to gain stab and also potential resistances. It also has items like Choice Scarf, Focus Sash, King's Rock, and Life Orb being very devastating and one of the reasons why this Pokemon actually hit Ubers. And rocking moves like Pyro Ball, Quick Attack, got some coverage in there like Sucker Punch, Zen Headbutt, Iron Head, High Jump Kick. Honestly, on top of its amazing speed stat as well, this Pokemon is going to be something that Cynthia will have to look out for because it could sweep her team. Now finally we get to cover the last of the Galar starters, Inteleon. Inteleon might be the weakest link of the three, but definitely not weak at all. It's still got the abilities Torrent and Sniper, and a great diverse move pool with moves like Snipe Shot, Dark Pulse, got Blizzard, Shadow Ball. It does have a fair amount of physical moves, because some of Leon's like sets were one's physical, one's special, but it does have access to things like Air Slash still and Sucker Punch, which are all great moves. In the items department, I'd have to say Expert Belt is its best because the rest are more meant for a defensive Pokemon, and this Pokemon's defenses aren't good to begin with, so it would probably be rocking Hyper Offense because of its great speed and great special attack. But compared to the likes of like Cinderace and Rillaboom, this Pokemon is not as good, but definitely probably better than the likes of Seismitoad. And finally, onto Leon's ace, Charizard. Now Charizard gets to rock both its abilities, Blaze or Solar Power, and has access to only the item Charty Berry. Now, Charty Berry does cut the super effective damage in half from Rock-type moves, essentially taking Charizard from a 4 times weakness to a 2 times weakness, which is beneficial due to Charizard not being the bulkiest Pokemon in the world. But it also does rock an amazing moveset in Fire Blast, Air Slash, got Solar Beam for coverage, Ancient Power, got Dragon Pulse to cover Garchomp, it's got Heat Wave if it doesn't want to risk the inaccuracy of Fire Blast, got Hurricane for extra damage, even Hyper Beam and Weather Ball. This Pokemon is definitely very offensive, and does have the stats to back it. With a base 100 speed and a 109 special attack, this Pokemon is a fairly good Pokemon in its own right, but will it be able to compare to Garchomp? Okay, so after going over the Pokemon, we can start to actually devise teams based off what Pokemon fare best against the majority of each other's teams. I used Pokemon Showdown as a way to make these into full builds, and I want to discuss each Pokemon on their team roster, including things like moves, items, and abilities, and why I chose them to counter each other's teams. Okay, so now that we've covered all of the Pokemon, we can now get into the team building, starting with Cynthia. So as you can see, this is what her team's going to be. It's basically her Platinum team, but with a few changes. And starting with Spiritomb. The Spiritomb is going to be running Leftovers and Pressure as the ability, as opposed to Infiltrator. Since Leon doesn't have any Pokemon that set up subs, Pressure is the best. Is it the best ability overall? No, not really. Pressure's not going to be stalling out too many of Leon's moves, but it's better than Infiltrator, at least it does something. But it does get to run Will-O-Wisp, Pain Split, Shadow Ball, and Shadow Sneak. These two, Shadow Ball and Shadow Sneak, are mostly meant for chipping and also taking care of ghost types. Shadow Sneak's good because it's priority, Pain Split's good because it heals up, Will-O-Wisp cripples physical attackers. It's basically meant to go up against things like Edgy Slash and Rillaboom where it can get off a Will-O-Wisp and start healing up, on top of having Leftovers heals. I am running Relaxed, giving it max defense, max HP, making this thing pretty bulky in its own right, while also still having okay attack stats to deal out some damage. Yeah, that's pretty much Spiritomb's gimmick, is just being bulky and disruptive. If it can get a burn off, it will. If it can heal up and Pain Split away while letting something whittle away from burn, it will. Chipping away with Shadow Sneak. Maybe waiting for miss opportunities from moves from like Pyro Ball or something. It's definitely a very good Pokemon to put like this kind of burden on Leon's team. But yeah, that's Spiritomb. Next, we're going to be covering Roserade. Now, Roserade rocking the White Herb and Poison Points over Natural Cure. Poison Points because it probably will be taking a lot of physical hits and not status moves. So Poison Points gives it a chance to poison the enemy. As for its moves, it's rocking Sludge Bomb, Leaf Storm, Energy Ball, and Sleep Powder. Rocking 2 grass type moves because I think having Energy Ball to not have to have the drawback of the special attack drop if it's necessary. Like say it's finishing something off and it needs Energy Ball damage. It's not going to have to lower its special attack by 2 and burn up its White Herb right away when it can just use Energy Ball. It's got Sludge Bomb for Rillaboom. It's got Leaf Storm for things like if it was to bring Seismitoad or Rhyperior. It's got Sleep Powder to just potentially get off sleep. If it gets off sleep, that potentially gets a free switch into a counter to whatever Leon has on the field, or it can just start chipping away. And it's got max special attack because its special attack stat is crazy. It's running Modest just to even power it up even more, and rocking max defense just to take some physical hits from things like Rillaboom. But yeah, that's pretty much Roserade's gimmick, is to challenge some of Leon's physically bulky Pokemon that have type weaknesses like Rhyperior, Seismitoad, and Rillaboom, because it covers them pretty well, and potentially could take a hit from some other Pokemon and get off a sleep. On to Melodic. Now for Melodic, we're running another bulky set with Leftovers, Marvel Scale, running Dragon Tail, Ice Beam, Surf, and Recover. Marvel Scale over competitive, again, Leon's team doesn't really have any stat dropping moves or status moves like Intimidate, so Marvel Scale, it potentially could get a secondary effect, maybe a 10% burn from Flamethrower or something if it switches into it. But definitely Marvel Scale is probably the better of the few, and Leftovers just for recovery. This is going to be a bold Melodic, rocking max special defense, max defense, because its HP is already pretty good. It's basically meant to, again, take hits, chip away. Dragon Tail gets rid of Pokemon that are on the field that are causing too much disruption. It's got Recover to heal off damage and stall, and Surf and Ice Beam for basic coverage. It does what Melodics do and stick around the field and just cause a lot of problems. Now we get to move on to Togekiss, where you might be thinking, why am I not running King's Rock to flinch stall? And that is because Togekiss doesn't really outspeed much of Leon's team. So Serene Grace is there more to get the secondary effects from Water Pulse and a potential flinch on some Pokemon. But Expert Belt's definitely going to be better to boost the moves against Pokemon it's doing super effective damage against. And because of that, we're running a defensive Togekiss with max HP, max defense. This set basically makes it so Togekiss can take a lot of hits and chip away. It's also got Thunder Wave for disruption if it needs to last-ditch effort cripple something, Water Pulse for coverage against things like Cinderace, Rhyperior. It's got Dazzling Gleam to cover things like Dragapult, Haxorus, and Air Slash just for another stab move and the potential flinch, also good against Rillaboom. Yeah, Togekiss again, pretty bulky. That's the common theme of Cynthia's team until we get to its next slot. Mega Lucario. So I am using the Mega Stone on Lucario. Garchomp benefits from not having a Mega in many ways, and also Mega Lucario is a complete monster. Rocking Adaptability, and also having the moves Bullet Punch, Close Combat, Extreme Speed. I am rocking the Earthquake, because it does have some basic coverage. But yeah, for its stats, we rock an Adamant. It outspeeds pretty much everything in Adamant, except for Dragapult, I believe, and Cinderace. Those are the only two Pokemon on Leon's team that I will show you later that he brought. Otherwise, Inteleon would also outspeed it, but otherwise, this Pokemon doesn't need to run any boosted speed. Adamant is the way to go. Getting that massive attack, great speed, and I guess its bulk is a little better than regular Lucario's. But yeah, with Bullet Punch, it's got that stab priority. It's got that, I guess, stab with adaptability for extreme speed, Close Combat to just obliterate anything that can get hit by it neutrally, and Earthquake for coverage. Lucario is definitely the prime Mega slot. So much damage coming out of this Pokemon, especially with its priority moves. And finally, Garchomp. So Cynthia's Garchomp's going to be rocking the Choice Scarf, because Choice Scarf Garchomp outspeeds every single one of Leon's Pokemon in Adamant. So even though it's Adamant, it still outspeeds everything with Scarf on, which is crazy because then it can rock all the power into its attack and basic speed, having a little bit of special defense for Charizard. So its moves rockin' Earthquake, Stone Edge, Outrage, and Swords Dance. Swords Dance is actually a very important move, and you'll understand why, because this is a max candidate that technically becomes Max Protect. Great way to stall out Leon's max turns, because Charizard does have the ability to use Max Airstream and Max Drake, which lower Garchomp stats and also give Leon speed tiers, making this a way to stall out some of those tricks Leon can pull with its max moves. And I gave it Rough Skin because in case of taking physical damage from some other Pokemon, it would get that. Otherwise, Sandveil is actually a good option due to the Stone Edge mischance and being able to set its own sand with Max Rock. But yeah, Garchomp, amazing Pokemon like always. Definitely a top contender, can rocking those powerful Stab Adamant, Choice Scarfed Earthquakes. This thing's a complete monster. So that wraps up Cynthia's team. Okay, so now we get to cover Leon's team, starting out with his Aegislash. So Aegislash is an amazing Pokemon that's able to run Adamant because it really doesn't care about speed. It's going to be running a physical set, rocking King Shield for defense and switching between the two forms, Sacred Sword, Shadow Sneak, and Iron Head with the Life Orb. This is a pretty standard like offensive Aegislash set. It's rocking max HP, max attack, because when it swaps forms, it's going to need that HP because it's attacks and defense swap, making it 50 defense instead of the 140. So yeah, putting bulk into its defense would kind of be useless. And basically this thing's goal, do damage. It can take out Lucario, it can counter things like Melodic even. Even though Cynthia's got a lot of bulk, Aegislash cuts through it with that massive attack. Moving on to Rhyperior. This Pokemon is a threat. Especially with Solid Rock and Rindo Berry, this thing might not even go down to a Leaf Storm. Like, there's a roll chance on it. This thing is so powerful, especially rocking max HP, max attack. It basically just could take hits from something and then deal damage back with moves like Earthquake, Stone Edge, Ice Punch, Heat Crash. Like, I put all of this into its attack and Adamant because, again, no care for speed, and it doesn't even need to put anything into bulk. It's just that bulky. Like, a 130 base defense is crazy. It is lacking in the special defense category, which is where its weaknesses do lie, but this thing can be used slightly as a tank to tank hits from like Garchomp and deal out damage. Like, Garchomp loses to Rhyperior every time because of Ice Punch. So definitely Garchomp is not going to be in against this. Roserade, even if it does not land the Leaf Storm, gets beat out by Heat Crash. Like, Rhyperior is a threat for a reason. And I did bounce around using Pashio because Melodic could then come in and surf it, but that gets to the point where it's like, oh, well, it loses to either Roserade or Melodic in the end as a revenge kill. So basically setting it up for Roserade instead. I think that was the more beneficial one. On to Dragapult. Now, Dragapult's going to be running a special set, running Shadow Ball, Flamethrower, Draco Meteor, and U-Turn for pivot, and also potentially taking advantage of the Lechi Berry, but its main is going to be using special. It's going to be rocking that max speed, timid, rocking some good, just basic special attack and speed. That's really what this thing is meant to do, is outspeed and throw off Shadow Balls and maybe end things with Draco Meteors to then switch out. Obviously, if I used eject button here, it would just get like Shadow Snuck or Bullet Punched and thrown out of the battle. So we're going to run Lechi Berry. It's the better of the two options, even though it's not the best, and it had to be run special because most of Leon's team is physical. Especially Cinderace. Cinderace, this thing, busted. Completely busted. Running Libero, Life Orb, max attack, max speed. Has to run max speed because otherwise Mega Lucario does outspeed it at max speed. So if I go Adamant, Max Lucario, if it was running Jolly, would be 155. That outspeeds this. It has to run Jolly. Otherwise, in case anybody was like, why aren't you running Adamant? It outspeeds everything else. It's because if it runs that, then Lucario could, per se, run max speed and then outspeed this, crushing it with a Close Combat or Earthquake. But this thing rocks Pyro Ball, High Jump Kick, Iron Head, Quick Attack. Amazing set. Got tons of coverage. This takes out Togekiss. This does damage to majority of Cynthia's team. Pyro Ball burns up a lot of Pokemon, even hurts Togekiss. Like, there is some inaccuracy issues with these two, so if it misses, it is going to be bad for Cinderace. But whatever it's hitting, due to Life Orb, great attack, high damaging moves, it's a complete threat. I'd say this is probably its best, Leon's best Pokemon, hands down. Yeah, there's rarely any drawbacks. It's basically just going to get whittled down by its Life Orb and maybe some priority moves from the other team, but definitely a complete threat. On to Rillaboom. We got a very, kind of running the bulky set of Rillaboom with the Grassy Surge. It is going to run Grassy Surge because I think it does need that passive heal, and even though it benefits both teams, I think Leon's team does benefit more from it. But it's rocking the max attack Adamant set with special defense boosted to take hits from special attackers. Cynthia's got a fair amount of special attackers, so it's basically meant to take some hits, deal out a lot of damage. It's got Wood Hammer, got Drain Punch, can knock off some items, Fake Out. Very standard Rillaboom set. Leon runs a lot of standard sets, which is kind of funny. And finally, onto his Charizard, the main event. So obviously it has to rock the Charty. I'm running Blaze over Solar Power due to the fact that Blaze has a better chance to kick in than Solar Power, since it's going to be G-Max, so it's going to not be able to set up Sun. It's rocking Heat Wave, Air Slash, Dragon Pulse, and Solar Beam. I chose to run these over the missable ones because I just think that even though it's going to max, like, if it does get stalled out of max, it's going to want to have more accurate moves instead of Hurricane missing or Heat Wave missing. And yeah, basically those missed chances could be the downfall of Charizard. I'm running it modest with max special attack, max speed. It outspeeds enough things that it doesn't have to really worry about running timid. And it can use that extra boost in the special attack to do more damage. It doesn't outspeed Garchomp in any way, so might as well run modest. So yeah, that's Charizard and the rest of Leon's team. Now we can finally move on to the mock battle and covering over damage calcs. Okay, so now that we've showed off each other's teams, we can now pit them against each other in some mock matchups. So what I wanted to start off with was Spiritomb and Aegislash. This is because they're probably going to be the leads, just pairing how their leads were in the games. I think it'd be kind of reasonable to say, oh yeah, she leads with Spiritomb, he leads with Aegislash. They do that in the games a lot. So from their sets, you can kind of see already, Spiritomb has the upper hand. Spiritomb can have a chance to one-hit KO with Shadow Ball, whereas Aegislash needs 2 Iron Heads, maybe 3. And also Spiritomb can hit a Shadow Ball, then a Shadow Sneak to take the win, whereas this needs 2 consecutive Iron Head flinches. It does have like the ability to do 2 Iron Heads and a Shadow Sneak, But this has Shadow Ball, Shadow Sneak. It could just go for straight up the Wisp. And say if we hit the status, it becomes burned. Complete nerf. But also it's taking Life Orb Chip from this as well. So it'd hit, lose 10%, then potentially even be in more range. Like, Aegislash is not faring very well against Spiritomb. Spiritomb does really good here, thanks to its defensive bulk. Like, Spiritomb was made to be bulky, and it is doing its job while still shooting with incredible damage. Like, there is very little situations where Aegislash wins. Like, even if it then switches to its shield form, it still takes like 20% from a Shadow Sneak, which then they say it does get the attack drop. Oh no, a little bit less. Like, Spiritomb pretty much always takes the cake on this one. And then we can also kind of show some of the others. Okay, all your stats are back to good. We can then look at other matchups. So say we then have Dragapult come in to try to clean it up. Say this is at like 50%, actually it'd be around 30 due to Shadow Sneak. It would be able to like take it out with then a Shadow Ball, or even a Flamethrower on a high roll, I guess, and for sure a Draco Meteor. But it wouldn't be before getting hit with another damage of around 38 from this Shadow Sneak. And say it doesn't have an attack down, it's taking a bit of Dragapult's health. And at full health, Shadow Ball, Shadow Sneak always wins. Because Dragapult would have to land a Draco, minusing 2 on its special attack, taking a huge nerf. Then we're just going to take some quick looks at every other one of its Pokemon. Say it needs to switch out, and it wants to switch out, it's going to be switching into a Shadow Ball more than likely. And it'd get hit by this. The Rhyperior would not do good against it. One Willow and then some Pain Splits. It might be able to retake its health completely on the switch in, and it would not do good for Rhyperior. Against Rillaboom is a little bit better of a matchup, but not really. Because say it's full health, it would then get hit by a Willow in second turn before it could finish off its stats. It'd still be healing up with lefties. Like, this thing would not want to go with that. It would have to basically sack and then finish with Dragapult. But Rillaboom is also another good one because say it is pretty damaged, it can just get in a knockoff after taking a Shadow Sneak. Grassy Terrain will be up because of that. Doing a lot less, like, getting more recovery, which would be great. But Cinderace doesn't take good from a Shadow Ball. Also, we'll talk about later the crash damage it can receive if it does get, if Spiritomb stays alive and has that like intimidation of the switch in to take the 50% crash damage, which is crazy. But hypothetically, Aegislash just gets an Iron Head, then a Shadow Sneak, puts it around, it would probably be after heals around 30-35%, and then it would have to switch into something like Rillaboom, where it for sure would be able to get off a knockoff for the KO, or a Wood Hammer, only taking like 21%, and then not risking the Will-O-Wisp like it would on some other Pokemon, or Chip on Dragapult. That leads me into talking quickly about Rillaboom. Rillaboom vs. Term, it basically gets hit by a Wood Hammer. Say this, if this thing is in full health, it would be a lot better. It could choose to, if it doesn't use Wood Hammer, it could get Pain Split on, which would not be good for it. It would lose a big chunk of its health there. So its best bet is to Wood Hammer because it outspeeds. Then we get to talk about Rillaboom versus some other mons. Obviously, it destroys Melodic. One Wood Hammer cleans it out. And it can't even do much against Ice Beam. It's got the Assault Vest. We then get to go against things like, say, Lucario. Lucario is an interesting one because its close combat does have a pretty good chance to one-hit KO. But say it has some chip on it, it's not good. Lucario could come in and just clean it up depending on how healed it got from Grassy Terrain. Let's say Lucario doesn't knock it out. Lucario at -1 defense gets bodied by Drain Punch, and then it recovers itself, which is not good for Cynthia's team. So, worst case scenario, it would have to use E-Speed, then Close Combat, or Bullet Punch Close Combat, since they do about the same, which is crazy. Yeah, so Lucario is a good option. Then we get to talk about Roserade. Roserade, if Rillaboom has any damage, like around 40-30%, 2 Sludge Bombs cleans it up, or just 1. Which is not good. It could take away the White Herb, which would suck for Cynthia. But for sure, if this is a matchup around full health, Roserade always takes the cake. And another, here we go with Togekiss. Again, it would probably want to land a knockoff to stop some of the Expert Belt damage. Due to Assault Vest, this is doing a lot less damage than it could be. but it risks getting T-waved and air slashed, and it can't flinch though. Togekiss is slower than Rillaboom. I'm not doing special calcs where I throw this up a little bit to make it just outspeed Rillaboom. Now we're doing the basic all EVs in one stat runs for this. But Rillaboom does not fare good against Togekiss. It does actually beat out Garchomp, but this scenario never happened. Cynthia wouldn't send in Garchomp against it. But yeah, that covers Rillaboom. Now I wanted to talk in that something that would come in probably after is Cinderace. Cinderace, obviously, being a complete monster, it loses to Garchomp. They're both in at the same time. But say it's in against Togekiss. Togekiss, yeah, it can't hit with a Water Pulse, but it would switch to something like Iron Head, changing its type to be Steel. And then, obviously, Water Pulse does less. It does have to risk getting confused by that, but say it hits an Iron Head, that's 70 damage. It could either finish with a quick attack, depending on the range, or just hit another Iron Head, which isn't good. But that would risk getting cleaned up by Garchomp. It wouldn't be able to outspeed Scarfchomp, so that sucks. But say it does, even Pyro Ball does a lot of damage to it, which is not good. Melodic against it, High Jump Kick is its best move. Obviously that brings in the situation of the crash damage. If it chooses to use High Jump Kick on something like Melodic, it would risk then taking so much damage, and then being a fighting type afterwards, it would only take 48 to 41%, depending on the roll for Surf. So Cinderace beats out Melodic majority of the time, which is kind of funny thanks to Libero being so busted. And against Lucario, it always beats Lucario. Unless it misses a high jump kick, Lucario can't beat it. It has to be chipped already, or it just gets beat out by high jump kick or Pyro Ball. The scenarios are basically, say it took crash damage from Spiritomb or something, gets beat by Spiritomb, it would be lower than 40% due to Shadow Sneak. It could then get hit by an E-Speed. There's multiple scenarios, but majority of the time, Lucario gets beat by Cinderace. And Roserade obviously gets beat by Cinderace. Like, Cinderace is a big thing. It will definitely take down a Cynthia's Pokemon in most situations. But yeah, then we'll just run some calcs against Lucario, because Mega Lucario is obviously crazy. So, obviously, it loses to Aegislash. Kind of hard, because it will outspeed, which means an Earthquake against defense form only does 70, and then it would switch to Blade form, and then destroy it with Sacred Sword. You pair it against Dragapult. Dragapult almost knocks it out with a Flamethrower for Lucario only to really be able to do Earthquake and then Bullet Punch. So I guess it would get the win, because if it EQs first turn, then Bullet Punches, that would KO it. But yeah, it's just barely. It has like 100% to 2-hit KO with that combo. But Dragapult could get a burn. It would put it down in like 1% range, which would be cleaned up by, again, like Cinderace or something. Against Rhyperior, it loses really badly in a way, because it has that percent. So say they're like Lucario does hit it. If it does not KO with that 101% on the roll chance, it has to get the high roll. It does get destroyed in both by Heat Crash and by Earthquake, because at that point its defenses would be -1 and Rhyperior just does crazy damage. So it can lose, but it has that slim chance to win. But basically, it needs to get a max close combat roll. Against things like Charizard, it can basically just hit an extreme speed for copious amounts of damage. Even close combat. It shows how broken Mega Lucario is. This is why it reached Ubers, is because that's a lot of damage. But yeah, Heat Wave takes it out. It has to land a Heat Wave, which kind of sucks, but E-Speed takes Charizard pretty well. And obviously we're going to do the Rhyperior calcs now, because Rhyperior is very good. We talked about that already, but it kind of beats out Garchomp almost. Like, yeah, one Ice Punch always takes that Garchomp out, so Garchomp sucks against it. It does lose to Melodic all times, because it doesn't outspeed Melodic, and one Surf knocks it out. That's the thing where I said, oh yeah, it has to run Pastio, but say it goes against Roserade. Roserade again knocks it out. It would have to be running max special defense and Rindo to be able to take it. And that even is on a roll chance, I believe. Like, say we smack this to 152. Yeah, there's a roll chance then it survives, but it isn't running that. And even so, then it would beat Roserade, but it's a hard roll and then it sucks against other Pokemon. Like, there's a lot of pros and cons to Rhyperior, and Roserade is definitely a matchup it does not want to get against. Then we go against Togekiss. Togekiss Water Pulse does a lot of damage, especially if it still has the Expert Belt. It doesn't even lose to a Stone Edge, which is crazy, even with that crazy amount of attack. Like, say, what's run with? Maybe I should have ran this as a... Yeah, Water Pulse then still, like, has a chance to 2-hit KO, but that would be lowered on the attack, so attack might do enough. There was obviously... Rhyperior's set, it had to be variant by Pokemon because it either loses to Water-type moves or Grass-type moves, there's no in between. And finally, the big matchup is Garchomp versus Charizard. So this matchup is probably the one everybody wants to kind of know about, and here's how I think it'd play out. Assuming these are both going to be max candidates and they're healthy at the time of battle, it doesn't matter how many Pokemon they still have in each other's pockets. Say this is just them going against each other, we can look at what it happens. Say there's no grassy terrain, no other effects, just straight them versus them. If they don't max, hypothetically, Garchomp, one Stone Edge basically destroys it. It could even play the safe route and go Outrage, and it always beats Charizard. Like, Charizard at base does not beat Garchomp. It's just terrible matchup. Doesn't have the best moves. Like, it can Dragon Pulse it, yeah, that does 68, but Outrage can either 1-hit or 2-hit, and it'll always outspeed. But then if we Dynamax both these, like say we just Dynamax, yeah, that destroys. Say we Dynamax here, it has a chance to knock out, and then knocks its attack down. And then but that's Charty Berry damage. Like, there's a lot of scenarios, but what we're going with is max on max. So this battle can go a few ways, but there's more wins for Cynthia, I think. So here we got the thing of it max Rock Falls. So max Rock Fall does about 75%, or it does that roll chance. But that's more than half, which means it 2-hit KOs. And that's with Charty. Like, say after we have to, like, take away Charty, it would be doing a little bit more. So it always 2-hit KOs that way. Otherwise, max Wyram really doesn't matter, and this is max Protect that is important for a scenario. So say it uses a max Wyram and it does 50%, even with the -1 attack, it KOs again. And that, because Charty Berry, I don't want to move it because then I have to search Charty Berry again, but it would definitely, after it, do enough damage even at -1 attack. And that's including Sand Chip. Sand Chip would take a bit of Charizard's health too. To say it uses Wyram to try to lower attack, that doesn't work. Overgrow and Flare are useless. Getting the chip from the G-Max move isn't really good. Like, yeah, we'd have to do G-Max for Wildfire, and it doesn't do the correct damage. Though it does have Airstream, and that brings up some interesting calcs. So when you max, you lose your Scarf ability. So that means technically Garchomp is at this speed, Charizard is at this speed, because they're maxed. So what it could do is max Airstream and get a +1 in its speed, bringing it up to beating Garchomp's speed in max. Meaning it would do roughly around, say, 35 damage to Garchomp. Well, then at 35, it could hit a Wyram, doing more damage. But say it maxes out on both these, it still technically does not have enough to beat out 2 Rock Falls, but it would give it that speed. So like at that +1 speed, it then could hit a Drake, and that would potentially give it some luck, maybe even a crit to beat out Garchomp. But what Garchomp could do is first turn always Protect. That stops the pretending Airstream, that stops a Wyram, that stops whatever it's going to do. No stat lowers on Garchomp's first turn of max. Where then Garchomp next turn has the safety of using Rockfall, and then has that damage on it. And then that, even if it Airstreams, yeah, it's at +1, but that doesn't even outspeed Scarf Chomp when they go back down. Because say it's at +1, and then they're both out of max, oh, Garchomp protected last turn as well. Well, we get to the point where now an Outrage knocks out. Because it'd be at like 20% at this point. Even with Blaze, Blaze only affects Fire-type moves. It's kind of pointless. So, most scenarios, Garchomp always beats out Charizard, which would secure the win for Cynthia. Say they're down to the wire, they're both full health. Like, Even the combo of Airstream plus this is modest Charizard with max special attack, by the way. Like, this is the most it can do is 38 plus 50, and that doesn't equal 100. Obviously, if this did a little bit more, it would be better, but it's not. 2 Rock Falls take the cake, and it can't beat out 2 in wire. Yeah, it doesn't outspeed, so it can't. It would have to be Timid, and this be Adamant, but that's just to say, oh yeah, then it can run Jolly, and the calcs are the same. Charizard does not beat out, unless it has like some magical plot armor, it does not beat out Garchomp. It needs crits to win. So yeah, that is the battle calcs. So now we're going to go into Showdown, do a mock what would happen scenario, just battle versus battle, and see who really would win here. But so far, it's looking like Cynthia has the favor of at least the Charizard versus Garchomp matchup. The rest of the fight could go differently, and that's what we're going to see. So here we have it, the battle between Cynthia and Leon. As you can see, a Leon team on the opposite side and Cynthia team on this side. So we can begin. So Cynthia leads with Spiritomb and Aegislash from Leon. Obviously we know the Iron Head's coming out from Aegislash and Spiritomb hits a Shadow Ball. Now this Shadow Ball actually knocks out Aegislash at 91%, and that's Aegislash gone. Dragapult then comes out and takes a Shadow Sneak before launching a Draco, leaving Spiritomb with only 1%. Now that was definitely a low roll, but it gets another Shadow Sneak off just to get hit by a Shadow Ball. Now out comes Lucario, and now that Dragapult is in range of Bullet Punch, Lucario can just come and clean it up, sending in Cinderace. Now it hits a Cinderace for the extreme speed just to get the chip, and the Pyro Ball obviously knocks out Lucario at full health, not missing a beat. Malak is able to come out and take a high jump kick. Now, the high jump kick knocks it to 30 and is able to finish off Cinderace with a Surf. Next Pokemon that comes in is Rillaboom, setting up Grassy Terrain and going for the Fake Out to try to get a little bit chip, lowering its health just a smidge to take a little bit less from the Wood Hammer it's going to have to pursue with. And then takes a little bit of damage from it, healing up thanks to the terrain, getting at 95%. Out comes Togekiss to fight off Rillaboom. Hits a knockoff, loses the Expert Belt, but it's still... the Air Slashes are doing so much damage, and only Rillaboom can do is really Wood Hammer. If it switches out, it's just going to be taking a Water Pulse from something. So it basically has to sack Rillaboom here and get as much damage with Wood Hammer as it can. So obviously the final Air Slash finishes off Rillaboom, and out comes Rhyperior as the Grassy Terrain ends. Water Pulse hits Rhyperior, knocking it down to 34%. Ice Punch knocks out Togekiss, 2 Pokemon left. Roserade's in, hits it with an Energy Ball. The Rindo Berry does absolutely nothing to stop that move. And Rhyperior's down. Charizard is last in, cleans up Roserade with a Heat Wave, and onto the main event, Garchomp versus Charizard. Garchomp Dynamaxes, Charizard Dynamaxes. Garchomp Max Guards, takes an Airstream to the Max Guard, goes for the Rockfall, takes Charizard down to 30% after the Charty Berry. Wyram comes out, knocks Garchomp down to 50%, lowers the attack, but our Max Rockfall still knocks out, especially after no Charty Berry. Charizard goes down, claiming Cynthia as the victor. After both the damage calcs and the battle, it's safe to say that Cynthia is stronger than Leon. Now that's not to say that the match was not close, and in some cases it could have gone different. But for the majority of the time, Cynthia is the stronger champion. So that should about do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if so, don't forget to interact with the video down below since you'll help the video out a lot. And leave a comment letting me know your thoughts on this match, and if you'd want me to see it done with other champions. Other than that, thanks for coming out.